So a little bit about researching the area. So we highly recommend that you check out the area before you actually go out into the field. And so we recommend that you research the area information provided in the brochure, the supplemental staking instructions here, and any of those materials. They look at some aerial imagery. There's some great sources out there available. I mean, Google Earth is pretty good for a lot of areas. The Geographic Institute of North America, or GINA, I've got the acronym right, has some great information about aerial imagery, or has some great aerial photography resources available to you there. Additionally, topographic maps. Again, the Public Information Center has access to a lot of that information and get you pointed in the right direction. But look at the area before you go out. There's a lot of specific things that you're going to want to consider when you're selecting where you're either going to stake a parcel, where you're going to start looking for a parcel. Access is a primary one. So ultimately, it's not going to be much use to you if you can't actually get to it, or can't get to it in the season that you're intending to use it. So access is going to be a major issue. Specific to that, access is going to play a large role in what the ultimate cost of your parcel is. As we'll get into when we cover the base appraisal information, largely the key parcel A and key parcel B is related directly to access and the accessibility of that parcel. So that's going to be something you're going to want to consider in selecting a site. Water availability. If you're going to be staking up on a ridge line, depending on the usage of the parcel and how you're intending to use it, you may want to consider either rain catchment system, or maybe you might want to look at something a little bit lower down where you have access to potable water if you're going to be using the site. Sites within your budget. We'll cover the base appraisal information in a little bit more detail later, but specifically we want to make sure that once you go out there select a parcel, that you're getting something that you'll be able to follow through with and actually get patent to, because that ultimately, as noted, we're looking for you to be successful in this, which includes going through the entire process of purchasing the parcel. And then reference points. This is going to be of specific note in that we are going to ask you to locate your parcel and tell us specifically where your parcel is located. A lot of that's going to be tied down to a reference point. So from this point, distance and direction to effectively your parcel or quarter number one. So planning that out in the head and where you're going to be going is going to help us out quite a bit. So collecting and preparing materials for staking. We're going to go over a lot of this or we're going to go over some visual aids here for some of this information. So to begin with, get your staking packet. As noted, I'd highly recommend that you make copies of the staking instructions, the lease application, the checklist, all that information, the supplemental staking instructions. Bring that out in the field with you, because that's going to help you be a lot more successful. So compassing. So when you're selecting a compass, I would highly recommend that you get yourself a good compass, preferably one that has adjustable declination on it. So this one displays declination, but it doesn't have an adjustable declination ring on there. A lot of them, they have a little metal or plastic key on there that you can insert, and you can adjust the declination specific to your area. This is going to be very useful in giving us the appropriate information that we can adequately locate your parcel. So compasses are important. If you're going to be using a GPS unit, bring extra batteries for the GPS. Make sure you're familiar with your GPS, and we'll cover that in a bit more detail. For measuring, this is a reel tape. This is a fiberglass reel tape. So this has, you can pull this out. This one's only 100-foot tape. You can get them out to 300 feet. They're a great tool for measuring distance and measuring it fairly accurately. You don't need to go quite this fancy. One thing that we're really fond of is if you get yourself a rope, 100-foot, 300-foot rope, whatever, knot it at certain intervals. So knot it at 10 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet. And then that way you can stretch it out the full length. You know that you've gone out 100 feet, then you measure the line, go to 50, go to 10, and then go to 5, and you can pretty much figure out pretty close to where it's at. So get something that you can adequately measure with for over some distance, because some of these lines are going to be measuring, they're going to be 600 feet, 1,320 feet, depending on the size of your parcel. Cameras. So a lot of people have nice digital cameras. I would recommend getting a disposable camera. We're going to be harping on this periodically throughout the presentation here, but the important thing is that we are going to be requiring a large number of photographs from you. We have to adequately be able to determine that you have done the work that you said that you have done. And that is done completely and accurately. So we're going to be requiring several photos. Every year we have to send folks back out into the field because they had insufficient photographic documentation of their parcel. Murphy has a law, and as such, if it can go wrong, it's probably going to. So when you're getting out of the float plane, it's going to fall out of your pocket and land in there. You're going to be out taking photographs, or your digital camera might freeze or doesn't work appropriately there. Sometimes shutters don't open. There's a lot of problems. If you bring, I would highly recommend that you bring a good camera that you're planning on taking pictures with, and bring a backup camera. Every time you snap a picture with the regular camera, go in there and snap another one with the backup camera. So that way you have that redundancy, so you don't have to go back out there and do it again. Bring extra batteries, extra memory cards. If you're using a film camera, bring an extra film. Just all this to help you be a little bit more successful in making sure that you get that information the first time. It'll save a lot of effort in the future. And then pencil and writing equipment. You're going to bring, you're going to need to bring something to take field notes on. If you bring copies of your staking instructions, more specifically your lease application, you can take notes right on there, and it's great because you can fill it in there. You go out there in the field, you get it covered in water and bug guts and snow and everything else, and then you can bring it back in, get a nice clean copy, and then fill it out in that. I highly recommend these Write in the Rain booklets. These are fantastic in that you can write on them whether it's raining outside or not, using a pencil, or some pens like them, some don't. Additionally, this is a rubbing of a monument. So when we get into reference points here, you can use whatever piece of paper to take an etching of that effectively. So with a pencil or crayon or something like that, to get the information off of there in the event that your photographs don't show. So it's another handy tool to have there. So depending on what you're going to be doing for brushing your lines, you're going to need a machete. You may need a chainsaw. Depending on the area, East Fork Pass is probably not going to do you a whole lot of good. But depending on the area, figure out what you might want for brushing. Machetes are nice. I actually really prefer a Sandvik. And if you don't know what those are, we're going to be pointing one out a little bit later. But it's a fantastic brushing tool. It's got replaceable blades. They go through alders just great. Great for limbing out, spruce and that other sort of stuff. So we'll bring that up when we actually get to that point for corner posts. For bringing out corner posts, kind of figure out what area you're going to be staking in. That's going to help you determine what you're going to need to bring out there in the field with you. We're asking for a post that's preferably 4 feet high, 4 inches square, brightly marked. Anyway, so if you're going to be heading out in the field, if you know there's not going to be a lot of trees or vegetation or something that you're not going to be able to square up to those dimensions out there in the field, plan on bringing out 4x4 posts with you. If you bring out 4x4 posts, and depending on what you have to attach it to, you may need to baling wire that to another tree. You may need to put in a fence, like a little T-post in the ground, baling wire to that, something like that. But something that's going to be permanent, because you're going to have to maintain these throughout the year. If you're staking in an area that doesn't have a lot of vegetation, you might want to consider bringing out. So bring something in there that you can adequately mark along those lines and some distances along those lines. Additionally, depending on how you're traveling, if weight's an issue and such, and getting out there, you may be able to use Carson posts for your corner post. These are a suitable alternative. The problem is that we are looking for something that's bright, something that's highly visible, something you can identify as a distance. On edge, they're a little bit difficult to see, is the problem. So they're not quite as good as a 4x4 post, and trying to get them into the ground, you're going to have to bring something out there to pound them in with, such as a post pounder. So it's an alternative that may work for you, but consider where you're staking. Flagging tape, I would specifically recommend that you get something that's either bright orange or bright pink. I would avoid using the green stuff. It may show up pretty well in a room like this, but you get out there in the dappled light, and especially a leaf out, it just really does not show up very well. So orange or pink flagging tape works the best. So metal for nameplates. Figure out what you're going to be doing. You can use, quite simply, a soda can for that. We're going to ask that you wash them, and we'll explain that later, but bring something that you can actually use for metal for your nameplates. These are going to, again, have to be out there for some extended period of time. Aluminum works the best, doesn't rust. Although this isn't actually a blank piece of metal, but some heavier gauge aluminum might be good. Plan on pre-drilling those, something like that. But collect that, whatever you're going to use for that. Additionally, bring whatever gear you're going to need to keep yourself warm, keep yourself relatively bug-free when you're out there. And although this isn't actually on the on here, I'm going to highly recommend that you bring a first aid kit. You're going to be going out there swinging around a bunch of sharp stuff. Accidents can happen, whatever, just safety first. There's a couple things you need to know about your GPS. First off, we're going to ask you to set your GPS to WGS84 datum. Specifically, that's the datum that we put the coordinates in. Most consumer-grade GPSs automatically default to WGS84. Some of them may be NAT83. Realistically, there's about a meter vertical difference, so it's not going to matter too terribly much to us. They're fairly, they coincide pretty well. But specifically, in order to be able to use the data that you have, we either need to have you set it up appropriately before you collect the data, or you need to be able to tell us what that data is. So the other format that we're going to ask you to use is degrees, minutes, seconds. So this is what we've provided for on the boundary coordinate diagram. This is what the lease application, the GPS worksheet is set up for. So you can set that up in your GPS ahead of time, collect all that data that way. If you're not comfortable with this format or you're not sure about it, first off, read the owner's manual, figure out how to use your GPS and figure out how to program this thing to begin with. If you get out there in the field, something happens, you end up collecting it in a different way, that's fine. Once you swap it over to WGS84 or to NAT83, from NAT83 or from whatever it may be, it'll automatically recalculate it. So that's fine. Likewise, if you can't figure that out, if you bring in your GPS with you when you turn in a lease application, bring it in there and say, hey, I got information, I don't know what it's in. And we can look on that, and we can figure out exactly what it is, and we can convert it over and capture that information. We just have to know what it is before we actually receive that. If it's in a different datum, different format, it's going to be more difficult for us to use, and it may be unusable, depending on what it is. Familiarize yourself with the GPS, read the user's manual, practice how to load the coordinates in there to begin with, and then how to navigate to coordinates afterwards. So if you plan out in the field where you're going to go, it helps quite a bit if you can kind of map it out, using Google Earth or some other program, get some rough coordinates for it, plug the coordinates in the GPS, but practice how to actually navigate to those points. Recognizing that the fact that the GPS, the consumer grade GPS, they're good within 10, 20, 30 meters. Generally, they're reasonably accurate, but they're not going to walk you right to a monument or walk you right to the site. Specifically, if you're going to be using one of the coordinates that we provided for a monument out there in the field, we don't want to know the coordinate that we said it was at or the coordinate that the plat said it was at. We want to know that we want to get a coordinate that your GPS gives you. So we want to know where your GPS says that it is, because that's going to help us use that data to interpret the data that your GPS has given us. Figure out how to use that. Figure out how to use the track feature if your GPS is capable of that. That'll help out a bit for if you're walking out in the field. While we are going to be asking you for a proposed access route to describe it in your lease application and to draw that on your sketch plat. So if you can use that track feature, that'll kind of that'll give you some idea as to where that's at. You can also use the route feature that you can use to navigate back and forth along the same route later. Additionally, when you're out there staking your parcel, if you're wandering around your parcel, it'll actually show you what your parcel looks like. So you may think you're getting a rectangular one, and then you get out there, look on a GPS, you may have some odd trapezoidal thing, which may be fine, but it kind of gives you a better idea of what you're actually looking at. So figure out how to use your GPS before you go out in the field. Specifically of note, I would highly recommend that when you're taking coordinates out there, that don't just rely on your GPS to save them, but write them down as well. We had a gentleman a few years ago who, quite unfortunately, went out and collected a whole bunch of information, got back to the office, and the GPS had erased itself. So nameplates. So specifically when you're preparing your nameplates or when you're planning on what to take out there for a nameplate, so again, you have a variety of different options. We're looking for metal, preferably aluminum, something that's going to not corrode. You can use gold nameplates and just tell me where they're at. But anyway, so if you like to use soda cans, you can do so. They're cheap, they're really easy to etch on there just with a ballpoint pen. However, we're going to ask that you certainly trace, or that, well, first off, you wash them very well anyway, and because we've had areas where we've gone out there and people use soda cans or beer cans for it, and bears have eaten all their corner post plates off. So wash them very well before you take them out there in the field. Additionally, if you're going to be using a soda can, or whatever you're using, regardless, when you mark those nameplates, mark over them with a magic marker, a Sharpie, something like that. A permanent marker over that does a huge amount of good for being able to read those. So prep your nameplates in advance. It'll actually save you a lot of trouble. Put your holes there in advance. If you're using a thicker gauge one, put nail holes in there, staple holes, screw holes, whatever it is. That way you can get out there, save yourself a lot of work right there in the field. And you don't have to rely on a frozen Sharpie to work either.